get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes
actually
in
a big
importance of
piece
What is that process that a developer, or let's say
As the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed,
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Admin Office Hours live stream. I am your host, Andrew Sullivan, and I am joined, as always, by Mr. Johnny Rickard. How are you today,
What's
Johnny?
up, man? I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, it's been 2 weeks, so I feel like I fell off the bicycle, and now I'm having to relearn how to walk. I just
I know
realized,
you're all a little wobbly.
yeah, I realized as we were starting, once Stephanie here in the background, and hello and welcome back, Stephanie. When she clicked the start button, I was like, "Oh no, my coffee's not here. Oh no, my water's not here."
What's happening to me?
Yeah. So yeah, it's I'm feeling a little out of practice. But it's all good because today I think we have a really good topic, something that is important to me, something that Johnny, I think we've talked about a couple of times before, and I'm really happy to have Ram Fryman join us from the engineering team for Assisted Installer. So Ram, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Ron Freeman. I'm Director of Engineering at Red Hat. My group is leading a Assisted Installer that we're going to talk soon about. Also single node OpenShift and some other exciting stuff that we're working on at Red Hat.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you, Andrew.
all that great single node OpenShift stuff all came from Ram and the team of folks there. So I know everybody, I think a lot of people, I should say, are really excited about single node OpenShift. I know it's been out for a little while because anytime we can reduce the footprint and make it more accessible for folks, that's important. Yeah, so it's been an exciting couple of weeks. There's been a lot of stuff going on. I actually got out of the house. Like that doesn't happen often, it seems like, especially not these days. I was at I unfortunately was not able to attend Summit nor KubeCon over in Spain, but I did get to go to Intel Vision, which was interesting and exciting.
Nice.
Yeah, it was strange to be out in public again, right? Or, I mean, I guess I go out in public to go to the grocery store and stuff like that. But going to a conference, being in person at a conference is, again, using muscles that haven't been stretched in a while. So.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, the whole social aspect of it, right? Just going out and then shaking hands and high-fiving people, just being around other people. Yeah, I'm sure it's pretty weird.
Yeah, well, and just the flow of conferences, right? And it's funny because I don't know how many conferences I've been to, right? And as tech marketing, we go to anywhere between like probably 4 and 20 conferences a year is probably the most I've been to. And you kind of forget that energy that comes with it, right? Because I mean, yeah, the one year that I did like 20 conferences, it kind of wears on you. But for a lot of the people that are there, a lot of the attendees, you might get to one every year or two. And so it's this very palpable energy. And it was nice to feel that again and to remember what it's like to be in a crowd of, I think Vision had 1,200 or 1,500 people in attendance. And
oh, wow. That's a decent size. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and everybody is excited about the same stuff, watching the keynotes, all that other stuff. Summit was similar, right? I enjoyed the keynotes online, but it's definitely not a not it doesn't have that same feeling of energy as when you're in the room.
Exactly.
So for those folks who were there, I'm jealous. I'm anxious and ready to get back to an in-person summit and an in-person KubeCon and all that. So, all right, I'll quit my rambling. Let's talk about some top of mind topics. Actually, before we do that, I should introduce I should do my normal spiel about what is the Office Hours series here on Red Hat live streaming. So, Office Hours is intended to be a time and a place where anyone and everyone can come and ask questions about whatever it is that's on the top of your mind. So Johnny and I are OpenShift administrators. We've got a lot of experience in that background, and we'll do our best to answer all of those questions that you ask us. If we can't answer those questions, which let's be honest, we are not all knowing.
Mere mortals.
Yeah, despite what my very young children used to think, right? Dad is fallible. Yeah. So if we don't know the answers, sorry, I distracted myself reminiscing. If we don't know the answers, we're more than happy to reach into Red Hat, find the right product management, engineering, so on and so forth teams, and get those answers. And if you happen to be watching us not live, so these streams are recorded on YouTube and Twitch, etc. So if you're not watching us live and you have a question, feel free to reach out to us. You can always reach me via email, so andrew.sullivan@redhat.com. You can also reach us on social media. I'm at Practical Andrew on Twitter as well as on Reddit. And we try and have our presence kind of spread across all of the different places. Johnny is JRockTX1 because he's in Texas.
Greatest country in the world. Yep.
What's the joke about people who run marathons? How do you know they're a marathon runner? Because they'll tell you. How do you know somebody's in Texas? Because they'll tell you. Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right. No offense to Texas people. I was just in Texas, right? Dallas, and A, it was hot, and B, I really wish that I had more time to be there because it's just there's so much to do, so much to see.
Yeah.
I'm let's face it, I'm a guy who loves food, and there is so much good food in Texas. So.
Oh yeah, especially if you like Tex-Mex. We could spend the rest of the conversation talking about that. Like I love eating too. So
yeah. Oh yeah, Johnny, you're in San Antonio. You've taken me to some really good places. So,
that's right.
Yeah. All right, let's do top of mind topics. So top of mind topics are some things that Johnny and I have identified over the last couple of weeks, really since our last stream, that we think are timely and important to you all, to our audience. So let's. I'm going to start from the bottom today, Johnny.
Let's do it.
So let's talk about OpenShift 4.10. So OpenShift 4.10 was recently promoted from the fast upgrade channel to the stable upgrade channel. So for anybody who was waiting for it to get promoted, now's your time. So just a reminder that fast is fully supported. It is a GA release, but I definitely get why folks want to wait until stable. And a byproduct of 4.10 moving to stable is that EUS to EUS upgrades are now enabled as well. So if you're currently on the 4.8 EUS channel, you can switch to the 4.10 EUS channel and you can take advantage of a quote-unquote accelerated update. So let's talk about the accelerated EUS to EUS update for just a moment, because through conversations with folks, and I don't know if he watches the streams or not, but Chuck, thank you for helping to clarify and make sure that all my understanding was correct. So the way that these work is it's not a direct leap for the entire cluster. So we hear, right, 4.8 to 4.10, accelerated update for OpenShift. And we think, oh, well, I'm on 4.8. I tell it to update to 4.10 and I go take an extra long coffee break and it's back up and running. And that's not how it works. So effectively what you need to do if you're doing an EUS to EUS upgrade is you pause any machine config pools that are for compute nodes. So compute nodes here refers to infra nodes, worker nodes that are, any individual worker node pools that you have for whatever reason, all of them except for the control plane machine config pools. Then you go through and as the administrator, you trigger an update to 4.9. Once that update of the control plane is at 4.9, you trigger an update to 4.10. So that process, 4.8 to 4.9 to 4.10, has to be sequential for the control plane. Essentially, there's no way for us to, leap or jump versions with the control plane because of a bunch of different things that happen inside of there. Not the least of which you remember is some API removals in the 4.9 timeframe. So please be aware of that. Once the control plane is on 4.10, you then unpause all of those non-control plane machine config pools. And at that point, the normal machine config rollout process will happen. And that means that effectively everything that machine config controls will then do a direct 4.8 to 4.9 update. Really, this is referring to things like CoreOS. So it will do a single CoreOS update from 4.8 to 4.10. And that includes, because it's included as a part of CoreOS, kubelet and all of those types of things. So interestingly, if you're thinking that through, right? So yes, the compute nodes are paused from an MCP perspective, but as the control plane updates, it's still going to push out various components to the host, to the compute nodes, to update for 4.10, 4.9, and 4.10 components. So there will be a little bit of mixing and matching. Fortunately, and I forgot to grab the link, Kubernetes does allow kubelet to be up to 2 versions previous to the current control plane version. So that's kind of how it all works inside of there. And RHOPE 9. Yep, that's why the pause button came into existence. Let's see. I think I covered that one kind of in depth. I think I addressed all of our bullet points here. I wanted to make sure. I did want to make sure and highlight that there is no magic button here, right? There is no button that, if you're on an EOS channel, it says, do an accelerated update. Us, the administrator, we have to do that set of steps that I described a moment ago of pause the compute nodes, do the control plane updates, unpause the compute nodes, right? All of that stuff. It is a manual process. And from what I hear from engineering, it's deliberate, right? We want to make sure that we know what we're doing and that we're not going to accidentally break something. All right, item number 2. Johnny, this was one that you added.
Yeah, so this is just, if you remember back to episode 62 when we had Miguel and Ricardo on about Microshift. So they are deploying Microshift on a SpaceX rocket today with it's a project called Endurance Cube. And so it essentially enables children to upload code to get the satellite sensor data back. So it's this pretty cool project that they're doing. The launch window starts today at 2:27 p.m. Eastern. So just so you know, some of the tech that we've been talking about on the show, it's hopefully going to space today, which I think is pretty freaking rad. Yeah, I think it's awesome to see Red Hat making it all the way up there, and it's cool to see some of these projects that our friends and coworkers are working on. It's getting up there. Or getting out there rather. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I've already been, internally making memes about, to the moon, the old Dogecoin.
Yes.
So yeah, it's that's super exciting, and that's really cool to know that our technology is really making an impact, right? It's always fun to see that, and that's in addition to OpenShift is on the ISS, if I remember correctly as well.
I believe so. Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for finding and sharing that, Johnny. That was
it's
really
exciting.
Cool. I did want to do just a very brief touching on, yes, the last 2 weeks we were off the air. We did not stream as a result of both KubeCon and Red Hat Summit. So we shared before, and we can share again the link for what's happening at KubeCon, or what happened at KubeCon, I should say. But yeah, there was a ton of stuff that happened there. Super impressed, super proud of all of the hard work that the Commons folks did. There were some great presentations there. Christian Hernandez, was kind of leading the charge with GitOps and GitOps Con and all the stuff that was happening there. There was Knative Con. There was like all kinds of stuff that was going on with Red Hatters. So definitely please give a look over all of the content that was there. And then we'll share the link here in just a moment for the blog post that was put out that has all of that stuff inside of there.
Yeah, and Andy Block did a good post, or a good session on secrets management, like just the numerous amounts of ways that you can manage secrets in Kubernetes in general. And he did a pretty good presentation on how to implement it and why you should and shouldn't do certain things. So check it out. Yeah,
and we shouldn't be surprised if Andy Block does an awesome presentation.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, Summit, very similar. Tons of stuff that was going on there. So I don't have anything specific. I actually created a set of slides because I was doing an overview presentation, but nobody wants to see slides of OpenShift centric releases. So most of it you can see on the OpenShift, the Red Hat press room. Actually, let me share my screen because we're going to need it in a minute anyways. So if I go to Red Summit press room, and I think this is it. Let's see, are we sharing? There we go. So yeah, if we look through here, there's just a ton of information that was here. I just did a quick Google search or DuckDuckGo search for a Red Hat Summit press room, and lots of stuff happened inside of there. You can see all of the sessions are available on demand. Registration is free. So you can always come and learn more. And then you'll notice that we also announced the Red Hat Summit Connect events that are happening in September. So from what I understand, those will be, as you can see here, hands-on labs, demos, training, networking opportunities. So these will be in-person events that are happening spread out across the country. Hey, Dallas.
That's right.
So I would definitely encourage you to check out all of those. I'm trying to think. Did I did some booth stuff at Red Hat Summit, which our booth was really cool this year. Over the last 2 years of COVID and everything being virtual and all of that, the virtual conference stuff has improved over the last year since the last time I did Summit. And KubeCon was the same way. We did an office hours, or not an office hours, a Ask the Expert session for KubeVirt, I think. So I hosted that along with some of the folks from product management and engineering. So yeah, definitely check out Summit. Lots of really cool stuff. I know a lot of people like the keynotes. Chris Wright did an awesome keynote on day 2. If you don't watch anything else, I would definitely encourage you to watch that one because it ties a lot of the stuff that we're doing together. And that's all I got. That's my list. Anything that you had to add, Johnny?
No, I think we covered it all.
Awesome. All right. So let's talk about Assisted Installer. So to kind of set the frame of reference here, Assisted Installer is exactly as the name implies, a way to deploy, to install OpenShift that is more friendly than the traditional command line interface. Right. So normally when we do an OpenShift deployment, we download the OpenShift install CLI tool. We create the install config.yaml, and then we kind of walk through the steps where it generates ignition files. We boot our CoreOS nodes. We point them at the ignition files. It does all of that other stuff. And even with IPI, right, we still have that CLI experience. And Assisted Installer doesn't help with IPI at this point, but definitely with non-integrated and UPI clusters, we get a much more, for lack of a better term, friendly interface, right? It's much more approachable, I think. And it's something that I always encourage folks. If you're not familiar with OpenShift, if you're just learning OpenShift, even if you're not learning OpenShift, if you just have a bunch of clusters to deploy and you don't want to have to, sit there and stare at a terminal window scrolling by, Assisted Installer is a great way to do that. So I will stop rambling about my perspective of Assisted Installer, and let's hear from Ram. Ram, as the engineering manager for the team of folks who have created Assisted Installer, tell us about it.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. So as Andrew said before, you finally just want to install OpenShift, right? And actually not, you just want to run your workloads and run your application. And that's what we try to tackle. We try to make OpenShift installation as like no deal. You just start, same as you go to your Galaxy smartphone or iPhone for those who have, install application and start using it, right? You don't really want to deal with how complex it is to install, CoreOS installer, ignitions, etc. You could most of the time you couldn't care less, right? You just want to deploy your YAMLs, and that's basically how we started. We wanted to say, okay, let's build a service, a SaaS, and we'll talk about it a bit later. Why? Let's build a service that will allow each and every user who is interested to start either exploring OpenShift or using it. It's simple and very friendly way to install OpenShift and use it without all the complication and without deep understanding and dependencies on the infrastructure. Since we are focusing on on-prem installations, and those who manage data centers know it's complex, right? You have to open tickets for DNS and for VLANs and for whatever. Only when you think that you want to install OpenShift, which can take weeks or months.
Yeah.
And we wanted, this is what we go. Let's reduce dependencies and have something friendly.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that we're talking about assisted installer now because it's gone generally available. So it's been available, and I think it's like episode 2 or episode 4 of Ask an OpenShift Admin. We had an extra long episode. It was a 2-hour episode where we did a deep dive into assisted installer as it was at the time, which was now almost 2 years ago. So it's been available and folks have been using it for a while. It was just in tech preview status. And that was really interesting and really cool to me because, yes, assisted installer was tech preview, but the clusters that were being deployed were fully supported clusters because, the install process is decoupled and not, in this instance, it's decoupled and it doesn't impact the supportability of the resulting cluster. So I always thought that was really interesting how we could do that and have those two separate experiences. But now it's GA. Now there's lots of other stuff that's happening, right? It's getting incorporated into and utilized by a number of other things. In addition to which, our field folks and we'll have to dig up some links and include them in the blog. There's field folks who have figured out all kinds of really cool stuff. Like somebody created a CLI for the assisted installer API so that you can use a CLI to deploy AI, not artificial intelligence, but assisted installer clusters without it's this really cool thing that you can kind of go through. So yeah, Ram, thank you for linking that. We'll get that or finding that link. We'll get that posted here in just a second. So yeah, it's there's just some really cool stuff that's been going on there. So let's take a step back, I think. So you mentioned the installation experience, and you have to go through and put in tickets. A lot of us have to manage things like DNS or load balancers and all of that through a different team inside of our organization, and it can take a while to get all that stuff set up. And one of the things that is among my favorite parts or favorite features of Assisted Installer is it does prerequisite checks. So with a regular OpenShift install, I set everything in the install config and then I tell it to go and I sit back and wait for 30 or 45 minutes until it fails. And then I figure out, oh, DNS was wrong or something like that. So I wanted to ask about some of the things that are happening behind the scenes that Assistant Installer does. And I'm going to share my screen and I want to bring up what the interface looks like so that way we can give it some context.
So basically, this was the idea, right? We wanted the users to be sure that as much as we can, as we could, to be sure that the installation will be successful. And if not, we wanted them to be able to address all the concerns and all the gaps in advance before the trigger the installation, because the trigger installation is more costly, right? We can CoreOS already being written to the disk, and then you reboot, and if it's bare metal, it takes time, and then you wait for tens of operators to try and stabilize. And so the goal was, okay, let's fail fast, not even fail, let's not start, let's validate. And this validation mechanism is kind of dynamic. We continuously improve it. We saw that some users may have slow bandwidth, and finally they will fail to download OpenShift payload. So we validate bandwidth before we try to install. We validate full connectivity. We can do a lot of we're FIO validation, we do NTP validation. So we know a lot of things that we can do in advance, since we have an agent running on the physical servers before we allow the users to trigger the installation.
Yeah, so let's I want to look at two things here. So one, I simply logged in here to console.redhat.com/OpenShift. Here, I can actually go back to the beginning here. So we can see I'm just at my OpenShift OpenShift tab in console.redhat.com. If I go to create cluster, select data center, and then at the top here I have assisted installer. And I can click create cluster here, and this is how I kick off the new installation process. So I give it a name, I give it a base domain. So this would be, my live stream cluster. So we'll do redhat.com. These do have to be valid, right? This turns into my cluster name of aoa.redhat.com. I can opt to choose in single nodes. I can use ARM here, which is really cool. If I need to edit my pull secret, so by default, it'll capture the pull secret of the user that's logged in. And then if I want to encrypt the disks for my underlying nodes. And interestingly, we separate out the control plane and the compute nodes. I assume there's a use case or a reason why folks would want to have control plane but
I
not
assume
workers
it's
or
one of the
control
features that
plane.
you have.
Yeah. So if I just click next here, I land at this screen. So it's pretty self-explanatory, which is another thing I really like about this tool, is that I don't have to go in and, as much as I love our documentation and as thorough as our documentation is, it can be overwhelming. And nobody wants to say, oh, let me go and deploy OpenShift, and then they've got to spend the next 3 days, reading just to get started on the first step. So, it kind of walks through the process here and tells you exactly what you need to do. So step one is I need to add some hosts. So I can provide my SSH key, so that way I can SSH into the nodes during or after the deployment process. Full image, basically it downloads a 1 gigabyte image that has all of the container images included in there. Minimal image is just enough to get booted, and then it will pull from the internet the images that it needs. So this one is useful. So for me, one of the example clusters I have, I'm VPN'd into Red Hat and connected remotely to a physical node and have remotely attached the minimal image file, because the VPN throughput is terrible. It's like 2 megabytes per second or something. So rather than it having to upload through the VPN and all of that, a whole gigabyte, it just does 100 megabytes. And then the node pulls everything using the internet connection from the data center, which is, multiple gigabits. If I need to set cluster-wide proxy settings, when I click this, it'll generate a discovery ISO, which I can download. I simply attach that to our host and boot it. That's it, right? It boots to the ISO. Because we're using the SaaS, it will reach out to the service and it will register inside of the interface down here. So what does that look like? So let's come back to our assisted clusters here, and we'll go to this guy. So one quick thing here, you'll see that these are in draft, whereas in this one is installed. So that's how I know that this one hasn't finished deploying yet. Let's make that a little bit bigger. So as I scroll down through here, I've booted this physical node, which we can see has 32 cores and 128 gigs of RAM. So I've booted this physical node to the ISO, and it has registered itself inside of here. So here is the host name that DNS assigned it. I can expand this out. I can get a lot of information about what's going on here. And Rom, I think this is what you were talking about a moment ago, or it's touching on what you were talking about a moment ago, which is there's an agent that runs inside of there. So
and I think one great example, what the strengths of it, if you shrink the details and go a bit above to vSphere checkbox. So basically, currently it won't let you to enable it, and I'll tell you why. The idea was kind of to hide from the user's our implementation details. Okay, vSphere, UPI, IPI, they don't want to know it. They just want us to tell them what to do. Okay, and then in the vSphere case, once we're going to identify that the virtual servers are running on vSphere, we'll suggest the user, okay, please check, use this toggle, and you'll get vSphere integration for free. Again, you don't have to think about it. The UPI, vSphere, it's not your problem anymore. Okay?
Yeah, that's really cool. Like I had noticed that this toggle is automatically on until it hits 5 nodes, and then it will give you the option of marking the control plane schedulable or not. This is deployed to a physical server, right? So I can't turn on the vSphere integration because it wouldn't work. And I think I seem to recall there's a number of things that happen inside of there. So mine shows a status of ready, so we can see that it goes through and checks a bunch of stuff. So I know it checks for things like NTP synchronization, because usually I get that alert. We can see NTP status is synced here. I believe it checks for host name, right? It won't let you use a host name of localhost. Does it? It checks DNS as well. I seem to recall. Like it'll.
Yeah. So, like one example in NTP is something that is interesting. You don't have to be synchronized with NTP, but we do verify it for you, and we have a notion of blocking validations and non-blocking validations.
Mhm.
So this NTP one is non-blocking. It will alert you that you cannot sync to NTP, and it will let you to configure NTP. On the other hand, we do verify that all your hosts time is synced between them. Okay, and this is a blocking validation. You will not be able to trigger installation because otherwise it will break its CD somewhere in between. It will take you a week to debug it. So yeah, so we have a file validation, and we have full connectivity mesh validation that basically check that all the servers can connect to each other on the relevant subnet you choose to run your servers on. So
Yeah, I encountered that one yesterday, where it thought that one of my nodes couldn't talk to the other nodes, and I dug into it a little bit, and then it rechecked and it was fine. So I thought that was an interesting one. I hadn't seen that one trigger before. And I also remember I was digging around in the GitHub repo a while ago. I think I remember there's a etcd disk check.
So we verify FIO speed, and we will alert you. It currently, again, it's not a blocking one, but we will alert you if your disk is slow enough and doesn't comply with its CD requirements.
That was one that I was always impressed with because, when I guess, gosh, how long has it been? Almost 4 years ago now. The first time I deployed OpenShift 4, I was thinking in OpenShift 3 terms, and etcd was still latency sensitive, but not like it is in 4. And I was deploying to hard drives, and I encountered issues basically right away. So I always thought that was really cool that it will, like you said, it's a non-blocking alert, but hey, you might want to reconsider which disk you're installing to.
Yes,
And you
and we
also,
let you choose it. Yes.
yeah, down here I was just noticing but it automatically chose this one as the installation disk, but I can switch that. I can make it a different disk if I want to. So I can choose which disk it's using. I don't. Can we set static IPs here?
We have it in an API already for a while. You can use the NM state configuration basically to set static IPs and VLANs and bonds, and we're gonna expose UI for that. I think next release, like
Very
it's
cool.
already the release after that.
And then this host name came from DNS, but
Yes.
if everybody was watching a moment ago, I clicked on it, and you can set the host name manually as well. Which I looked into that. I think I asked you about it, Ram, and the way that gets set is really cool, right? In that you inject some ignition into the bootstrap process, and it sets the host name.
Yeah, we basically don't do anything special. We use OpenShift installer and CoreOS installer, all those stuff, like knobs, to be able to propagate relevant YAMLs, etc., to finally reach desired OpenShift. So you can do everything on your own. You can read the documentation. You can ask on chats. It will take you a while. Or
I'm catching up on chat here. Johnny, was there any questions in chat?
Yeah, so it was just basically talking about. I'm sorry, I had one, I missed it. There was one where they were asking if the CLI could actually set. I think they were asking if it would set a static IP, and it looks like there was a response back, and then there's just a bunch of comments about the assisted installer being great, and essentially like now that we have the variety of installers, it's we're kind of meeting all the needs, right, with UPI, IPI, and the AI, which is weird to say AI.
Yeah. Our Hope 9, I see you commenting here about, yes, the new OpenShift install experience, in my opinion, is dramatically improved compared to OpenShift 3 days. Because I think it makes OpenShift 3 was arguably easier for people to understand what was happening. I go and deploy RHEL onto my nodes, and then I use Ansible to go and install all of the OpenShift things that are needed. I think the problem there was so many things happening that we frequently had issues in various parts, and you could rerun the Ansible playbook and it would go through and reapply things that needed reapplied or not, as the case may be. But it took a long time and it was a delicate process. Whereas OpenShift 4, the install process was simplified. And yes, as the administrator, as the person deploying it, it's a little more opaque. But it was also dramatically simplified to make installation more frequently successful.
And then we did get a quick question from Joshua Loskar. Hopefully I didn't say that wrong. Just asking about the minimal requirements for single node.
So it's 16 gigabytes of RAM and I think 4 vCPUs. But try it out and we'll let you know. Use this installer and we'll let you know if you're satisfied or not.
Yeah, and our hope not. I appreciate the dig for multiple DHCP servers. I deserve that. That was from when we were doing that, Johnny. Control plane node recovery. When I accidentally had 2 DHCP servers running.
Double dipping.
Yeah. Rom, I know it will validate minimum system requirements. I seem to remember it was definitely before GA. I was trying to deploy single node OpenShift in a VM, and it wouldn't let me go below, I think, 32 gigs of RAM through Assisted Installer. Through the CLI, I think you can do 16.
It was for a reason. Like we wanted, like it was the early day. We just started SNO, so we wanted to be sure that the people who will try it out will be successful, and we didn't want to rely on busy neighbor or some like slow hardware. So we asked for more resources just to be sure that the installation was successful. Once we gather enough information, get certainty and success rate, we could reduce the requirements.
Yeah, and Joshua, so 32 gigs of RAM will definitely work, and you should have at a minimum 12 or 16 gigs of RAM for workload there. Ram, did you say 4 CPUs? I think was the minimum.
If I recall correctly, it's documented in the UI. We can check it out.
Yeah, it'll tell you. It'll warn you if you don't have enough down here. But I seem to recall it's like OpenShift. The OpenShift components themselves will create requests for something like 2.5 or 3 CPUs. So if you can't go less than that, and at 4 you have very little left for actual application workloads. All right, we stared at the screen long enough while I ask questions. So a couple of things to note here. One, this view cluster events gives you insight into what's actually happening behind the scenes. So you can see the cluster validation. We can see up here, and this goes goes backwards from the top. So this is the most recent event. If I had more than one host here, it would be giving me information for all of the different hosts as well. You see I can sort by which host I'm looking at. So let's hit next. So the next step is kind of how do I want to configure the node? And if you're familiar with installconfig.yaml, you'll see a lot of these fields look familiar. So for example, this would be my, in installconfig.yaml, this would be the machine config or machine network.cider that we specify for our cluster. I can also tick the box for advanced, and I can set the cluster network, the service network, all of those things inside of here. I can select which SDN I want to use. You'll notice that OVN is by the default for single node OpenShift, which I think is really cool. And let's see, was there anything else here? So it's not available on this one because it's single node OpenShift. But if I were deploying a regular cluster, one of the things that Assisted Installer was the first and the only way that I knew of at the time to be able to do it is I can use the integrated load balancer from IPI with a non-integrated or UPI cluster. So if you do that, it will flag it and basically say that, hey, this networking config isn't supported. You should be using the external, you should be configuring an external load balancer for this. But I loved doing that in my lab because it was super easy to stand up a bunch of clusters without having to worry about, changing load balancer configs and all that other stuff.
And again, this was like the goal was start installing, don't start opening tickets to your RT to ask for for external
Yeah.
dependencies. Another big achievement, big improvement that we removed the requirement for a bootstrap node, right? You don't need it anymore. It's bootstrap in place both for SNO and for multi-cluster node. So yeah, you don't need extra hardware to install OpenShift.
Mm-hmm. So as I'm looking at this, you'll notice one, it's telling me that there's something wrong, right? So there's an insufficient status. I have access to the same information that I did before, but you notice that I can no longer change these. And I can go here and I can do things like change the host name as well as view specific host events. So let's see, why are the subnets insufficient? Yeah, that's the one I want. So I don't know why it's telling me that there are overlapping CIDRs. Yes, they are the same. That should be correct.
Maybe you hit a button.
Yeah. So most likely what I think this is, and this is what I was talking about yesterday. What I found is when I go to the screen, it does a recheck of a bunch of different things, or at least that's what it appeared like. So when I was selecting things up here and changing things up here, yeah, Yigal, I wonder if that could be it. Because you're right, there are 2 NICs down here. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Which is a problem, right? Because
yeah, and that should be one of these should be on a different subnet. So it's interesting that they both got the same configuration.
So you would fail if you start installation.
Yeah.
Yeah, the message I assume should be improved, but you cannot start installation because.
Yeah, that was a good catch, Yigal. I don't know if you saw that, and in the brief moment that I had that expanded, but nice work. So yeah, so it's going to tell me that, hey, this, and you'll notice that while that is in that status, I can't go next. I can't actually kick off the install process. So if I wanted to at this point, I think I would have to either use the API to change that IP address or unset that IP address, or I can.
Well, you have to change it on your host.
Yeah. And
like disable the card, but it's yours.
Yeah. So, and to do that, I would need to effectively delete the node and then reboot it.
Or use SSH, and I'm not sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can SSH to it at this point.
Yes, you added the SSH key when you configure it.
Let's see if I wonder if that'll work. Can I do that? See what happens if I. No, it's not going to work. This is what happens when I'm connected to like a bunch of different things at the same time. My desktop can't reach the host in order to modify it, so I have to like double leap, and I'm pretty sure if I do that, it's going to break the stream. So I won't mess with that for right now. Instead, what I'll do is I'll switch over to my other cluster.
Well, the good part here, right, is like we had a happy accident. You know what I mean? Like we can see where the validation fails, and then it prevents you from shooting yourself in the foot and getting so far down the road that you can't do anything.
Exactly. So I happen to have another cluster that's deployed. So I deployed this one yesterday afternoon. And you can see this one has 5 nodes. So I have control plane 0, 1, 2, and workers 0 and 1. And this happens to be a cluster that is virtual machines. And it was it is on VMware, but I did not choose to do the VMware integration because I didn't have vCenter running, so it would have failed. But a couple of important things happen here. So one, basically, if I were able to click the next button, it would go and you would see a screen that looks very similar to this, but it would tell you like what's the status of each one of the nodes. You know, if I click here, you can see that there's a bar that goes through and fills up. One of the other really cool things about using Assisted Installer is you'll notice that it used one of the nodes as a bootstrap. So I don't have to have a separate dedicated bootstrap node in order to do the deployment. It uses one of the existing nodes. That to me is really, really cool and something that is beneficial, particularly in constrained resource environments. So if we expand out here, I get the same sort of information about all of my hosts, right? The installation disk, here's the IP address that's associated with it, various hardware information. So I can come here and I can view specific events related to it, right? Tells me everything that's going on. And eventually what happens is all of these finish installing, the host gets installed, and it provides me with, or the cluster rather gets installed, and it provides me with all the information I need to connect, right? Here's the console URL, here's the default, kubeadmin password. I can download the kube config so that way I can connect to it and do all the things that I need to do. And it does warn you here that that information is automatically removed after 20 days. So don't wait too long to download that or add in configuration to be able to do to add in authentication authorization type roles on your cluster. But yeah, it's very straightforward. It's easy, and that's the way we want it to be, right? We don't want to have to worry about all of these different things that are going on. Here I'll click over to the cluster. So this is the OWV cluster that we were just looking at, and it's a cluster, right? 4.10.13. If I come down here to my compute nodes, right, here's my 5 compute nodes. It is a non-integrated install, so there's no machines or machine sets. But it's just a cluster, and that's the awesome part about it. I literally last night when I was preparing for this stream, I generated the cluster and downloaded the ISO, right, clicked through and did everything that I need, and then got up and went and had dinner with my family, and came back 45 minutes later, and it was at literally the screen that we're looking at now, and said, here's how to connect to your cluster. It was very straightforward, and just booting to an ISO is, in my opinion, so much easier than having to do the dance with Ignition. All right.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is, I've been crying about this for so long. This is, I think I'm excited about this. This is super rad.
Yeah. So, that was my 20-minute walkthrough of Assisted Installer and all the things that are going on there. So one, there is a way that you can add nodes to a cluster. So let me think this.
You should go to your OCM cluster, and we'll let you do that from there.
Yeah. Well, so this cluster, which did we set this one as a? I think we set this one as a. I thought there was a way that I can add host to the cluster.
If you go to OCM, just like to standard OpenShift clusters view, go back to clusters. Yes, here. Open your which one? I don't know.
Transfer cluster ownership. Nope.
No, just like press the link. No, you go inside.
Oh.
This one, and then here on the add host, you see kind of next yes here, and it's kind of this is unified view. We're already working on unify also the previous cluster list view into OCM standard cluster view, so everything going to be shown together.
So essentially, you can get the same installation experience as you would, which is not to say that you can't add nodes in the traditional way, right?
If you want to go UPI, like you download the course, right? You inject it inside, you point it to the ignition that runs on your control plane, and if you do it with this way, we're gonna add extra verification. We will have we check connectivity, we check this speed, we check some stuff that you won't be able to keep.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So it gets that same set of validations. You get that same,
not same, but partial, but yes, better.
Yeah, I guess that's fair, because you're not going to be adding a control plane node necessarily.
And also we don't have access to your cluster. Once you installed, we cannot access it anymore. So we do whatever we can as an external user. We don't have kubeconfig, we don't have anything. So and of course your cluster is in your data center. So from the SaaS, of course we cannot access it. So we do whatever we can without having an access to your cluster.
Yeah. To be clear, we're not setting up a backdoor into every cluster in order to collect information or anything. So.
Yeah, once installation is over, there is nothing that is running on the cluster and talk to the assisted service.
Yeah. Yeah, and this block here is only present with an assisted installer created cluster as well. And this one disappears after that 20-day period, if I remember correctly, once it purges the
We
Kubernetes.
don't want to store. Yeah, we don't want to have a persistent storage for user credentials, right? So we keep the logs, we keep the events for users to be able to check it, to report issues. But then after randomly set 20 days, we just delete all the data and that's it, because we don't want it to be persistent. We don't want to own the data.
Yep.
So Ram, we had a question earlier. It was from Mike, and it was essentially how do we add or how do we deal with HA failover with single node OpenShift? Is it through ACM? I know that there's some like back channel rumblings about multi snow
Yeah,
deployment.
so currently SNO is SNO, right? Single node OpenShift. If you want HA, you install highly available control plane. We don't allow, we as OpenShift under Red Hat Assisted Installer, we don't let users to expand SNO into multi-node. So first of all, you can have resiliency built into your applications. You can have 2 replicas running per SNO and with a load balancer and some standard stuff. This is basically the recommended.
Yeah, that's a conversation that I feel like we've been having semi-frequently lately of, how do I do disaster recovery with OpenShift? And as you would expect, VMware is the most common infrastructure underneath OpenShift clusters. And what I tell folks is, the applications hosted in OpenShift, like the DR for those is decoupled from the DR from OpenShift itself. In the same way that, DR for vSphere, right? So for restoring the ESXi hosts and clusters is, separate from restoring the virtual machines and what's happening in the virtual machines. So just recovering OpenShift doesn't automatically recover the applications, no more than just recovering an ESXi cluster recovers the virtual machines. So that's it can be particularly for virtualization admins, guilty as charged. That can be a hard concept to understand, because we're used to things like SRM, and we just say, okay, SRM, go and restore the virtual machines over there, and everything will come back, without realizing that there's a whole separate layer, another tier of things on top of OpenShift in this case that has to be recovered.
But of course, if you have kind of application data stored on extra disk, you preserve the disk after, and then you reinstall or recover, and your application, it's up to your application to be able to use the disk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I have a personal question that I know like some of the guys over at Naps are going to ask and stuff like that. It is understanding that the assisted installer right now is all SaaS offering, right? Is there a disconnected version of this that's going to come out where we can pull down an ISO and then launch an app from the ISO and then, kind of go through the same type of user interface and then, essentially do the same thing, but just on a restricted network or disconnected network?
So basically 2 flows. First of all, we have an integration with ZTP, with ACM, which is called ZTP, Zero Touch Provisioning. This lets you deploy OpenShift at scale. So Kubernetes native, you can use GitOps, you can just create the CRs, and underneath it's using the same core technology of the assisted installer. I think we did very nice is that we have the same assisted service, assisted agent, assisted installer that been reused in many use cases. So the same core code, same services that are running either on SaaS or on-prem, and the code is being reused everywhere, which on the one hand, it makes our kind of development life a bit more complex, because you have to deliver to SaaS and you have to deliver to ACM and you have to build multiple downstreams and all the regular Red Hat development overhead. On the other hand, many use cases and people being used it, and like we identify issues if by accident we introduce a bug, so a fix of it will appear everywhere, right? So static IPs validation, we saw that someone fails on ACM, and then we fix it also we fix it in the service, and the users of the SaaS gain from it as well. So the same code runs everywhere with different wrappers. So in the SaaS, it's REST API. In ZTP, we have a wrapper of an operator and controllers that are orchestrating the same service, but the code is the same. So yes, ZTP is the first installation at scale on-prem, completely disconnected. Another thing that's currently being worked on within OpenShift is the agent-based installer, which is basically takes assisted installer service, runs it inside an ISO, and build a CLI around it to allow users to have a complete disconnected installation of, call it cluster 0 of your first or and first disconnected clusters. This is currently work in progress, and it reuses whole assisted installer stack with some enhancements.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'll take a moment. One, Johnny, you said ask a personal question. I was expecting like, oh, Stoli, why is your beard so gray? Or
Nah, man, nah. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. We love the gray. It's a Chrome package.
Yeah. So, but you meant a question that you were personally interested in.
Indeed.
Anyways, so yeah, the agent-based installer is something that so I internally, and any Red Hatters who are watching, feel free to reach out. There's a blog, an internal blog that team runs that I've been following for a while to see that progress, and that's something that's really cool to me. I'm very much looking forward to the day where we can invite that team on and share and demo and look at all the things that are going on there. So for anybody who's watching, please subscribe to the channel, check out our red.ht/livestream link and keep an eye out for when that topic pops up.
I just want to kind of go back on something you said too, Ram, which I think it's really awesome. And I think that it just shows it shows the dedication that Red Hat is putting into making sure that the customer experience or the user experience is optimal, right? And it's that you're taking the brunt, your team is taking the brunt of all the pain on the back end, getting the SaaS offering and then the command line offering and all that stuff. You're going through all of those hurdles and trials and tribulations, so that way the customer on the front end isn't seeing that anymore. And I think that's awesome, because I feel like maybe for a long time the customer thought it might have been the other way for a while, with the UPI and stuff like that, with just the complexity of the install early on. So I'm really glad to see that you guys are taking that on and pretty much just owning that pain. And I'm thankful for it, and I know our customers are too. And I see my boy Matt Bach is on. Hey Matt, how's it going? Naps Nation represent.
I agree with everything that you've said there, Johnny. Making OpenShift accessible is something that is, personally very, very important. Ask an OpenShift admin, right? How many times have we talked about the install process, here on the stream? It seems like every week there's something.
Exactly.
Ram, if you don't mind, I want to touch on ZTP, so zero touch provisioning again. So I admit I only have a very basic understanding of what's happening here. How is that related, or is that maybe a different name for the factory installed OpenShift stuff?
Right. So what basically, I guess you're referring to ZTP for factories that we just announced at Red Hat Summit, right? So basically what we did in KCM to 4 and then to 5, we're going to G8, is we built a way to have Kubernetes native APIs to deploy OpenShift at scale. What it essentially does, it takes Assisted Installer service, wraps it with Kubernetes APIs, integrates it into ECM and Hive, and underneath it reuses Metal 3 to do the actual machine orchestration. Okay, so you create your CRs, it's called infra-env, and then you create a cluster deployment and agent and some other CRs, and then all the operators reconcile with basically same as you presented in SaaS. We have pre-flights validations, and we tell Ironic to boot the nodes, Metal 3 boot the nodes, they're registered instead of the user downloading the ISO and the register, right? Then we run the pre-flight validations, and then we trigger the installation and report the progress, and everything is screened by CRs. And this go all the way to site config and Argo CD and GitOps. So you can part of the ECM, so you can create your cluster configuration for site configuration within your GitHub. Within your GitHub repository, you can also, as part of it, you can also add ACM policies to install, to configure, to deploy extra operators post installation. You define it, and then those CRs are getting applied onto the relevant namespace, and those reconciliation starts. Okay? Yeah, honestly, I think it deserves a separate session on its own. But yeah,
Yeah. I was chatting with Johnny yesterday, and we were talking about all the stuff that's happening, inside of OpenShift with assisted installer and zero touch provisioning and centralized infrastructure management, and like there's this whole list of like 8 or 10, new 2 and 3 letter and 4 letter acronyms for things that are happening, and it's one of those like. I almost feel like we need somebody to come on and kind of explain the whole data center to edge strategy and set of features and capabilities that are available. Because 4.11 is going to be kind of the start. 4.12 has a whole bunch of stuff that's happening inside of there, and it's a little bit top of mind because we just did the Y kickoff this week for 4.12.
So from assisted installer perspective, so on that front. So yes, as you said, ZTP, but we also have central infrastructure management, which is basically allows users to have a late binding state of mind. They boot their servers that are live there and waiting to be allocated to clusters. Okay, so a user can have a bunch of 20 servers and then dynamically allocate 3 nodes to a cluster and then deprovision and bring it back to the pool. And again, so it's kind of give your data center a cloud-like experience.
Mm-hmm.
Moreover, we also added in 2.5, we're going to expose a cluster API to the notion of late binding and integrate it with Hypershift. So think about Hypershift on-prem. You want bare metal nodes to your Hypershift. You work with Scapy API towards the late binding of the assisted service. It allocates you pre-allocated agents, assign them to your nodes, everything with Scapy, and they got installed. And then you have your autoscaler reduces the capacity, and the node is brought back to the pool and is available for X cluster to consume.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. What was the thing I was asking you about yesterday, Johnny? MCE.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the multi-cluster engine and all of the stuff that's happening there, and when you plug all of that in with what's happening with at the last what's next, the last roadmap presentation, we touched on KCP. It's just this huge set of capabilities that are coming up in the future that it's as everything happens, as things mature, it gets bigger, and we add features, we add capabilities, and it starts to get hard to keep track of sometimes. I have a running joke with some of the PMs of, Kubernetes itself is like a fractal, right? Oh, what is this? How does this work? And in the process of answering that question, you now have like a whole nother set of questions. And for every one of those that you answer, it's a whole nother set of questions, and it just keeps going. And then you layer.
On the other hand, there are so many use cases, right? You have edge, and you have DPUs, and you have smart DPU SmartNICs, and you have data center, and you have distributed data center, and you have to address them, right? Because there are tons of use cases, telco and industry, and
it's like, again, I'm an old VMware admin, right? It's like VMware's portfolio of things and set of capabilities has expanded over the 20 years since I started being a VMware admin, and you kind of inadvertently end up specializing where you focus on the things that are important to your use case, or use cases as the case may be, and you have to pay some attention to what else is going on, but you can't be a specialist, right? You can't be knowledgeable in everything all of the time, which is why me in the live stream, and Johnny, I'm fortunate that we have differing skill sets, right? And we're able to invite people like Ram on to help expand that. Yeah,
this is awesome. So Ram, do you want to talk about the advantages of the SaaS offering over everything else?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I think what there are two parts. Who gains from it, right? So first of all, users, Red Hat customers, partners. They don't need to run anything on prem. They gain from the fact that we iterate very fast, right? We identify issues. We deliver to the SaaS every, I think, 3 or 4 weeks, depends. So we continuously collecting feedback and improving the product. I can give few examples, like what we do within the group. It's really important to us to see how the product behave and how we can continuously improve it. So we have triage duty. So all the developers within the group have, I think, 2 days every 3 weeks, proactively going through some of failures that we see in SaaS and try to triage them to understand what went wrong, what validations are we missing, where the users failed. Again, without users approaching graded support, they don't. Most of them, I don't know, either retry and succeed or don't, which also bothers us. So we really want to be proactive to be able to address those issues. An example from, I think, last week, we notified, and it took us a while because we don't triage all failures because the scale is already very high. So we noticed that the users let's configure hostnames with capital letters. And it will fail somewhere deep inside OpenShift, but if you use just OpenShift Installer, right, and you don't report the Bugzilla, no one even know. And we did it. So we tried it. We understood the issue. Then we looked back at the data that we have. We saw that since the beginning of this year, there were 10 similar failures, and we could prioritize it to fix it. So now we have a validation that won't let the user to configure capital letters for hostnames, right? So it's kind of one of the examples of how we help users to be more successful, and now running SaaS helps us. Of course, beside that, we collect data and we understand what features are being used. We don't do A/B testing per se, but we do understand how our users behave, what features do they use. That helps us to prioritize bug fixes or see where people are struggling and improve those parts, because we have all the data available and we are proactively looking into it and trying to figure out what's the next step to help the customers to succeed.
I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's something I hadn't considered before, which is historically in the install process, there's no way for us to know what does and doesn't succeed or cause issues unless somebody opens a support case.
Yes.
So Assisted Installer kind of gives us that insight, right? Where now we can, find or at least, have some awareness of when things go wrong, even like you said, 10 cases, which, that's just 10 cases of what Assisted Installers worked with. Who knows how many have happened otherwise? And it's this, maybe it did result in a support case and it was solved silently, or, what was the thing where, you talk to the firewall admins or the load balancer admins, like, oh, this isn't working. Oh, I don't know why. And they're silently changing something. Like, nothing's changed. It's all exactly the same. And, yeah, but now it magically works. So anyway, sorry to interrupt you, Johnny.
No. I talked over you. My bad. No, I was just going to ask, Ram, are you guys working with the Red Hat SRE team to get all this metrics and collect all this stuff, or is this something that you guys are just doing from your team internally? Like, how is it like a Red Hat thing, engineer wise? Team that's watching all this data and then coming up with the solutions, or is it really just your team kind of focused in on it and knocking it out?
So currently, since we just recently GA, so up until now, the last 2 years, we build the pipe. Of course, we use Apps SRE pipelines to run all the services, Elasticsearch, etc. But basically, we own and maintain the data. And now we are working together with CCX to ship the data to that funnel as well. And we're also going to engage. We are engaging with the support team to start looking to help us and to get involved into the virtual cases, right? Because no one actually complained, but to get involved and see how it can be improved. Okay, so
Yeah, that's awesome. It's SRE, as you know, it's a big topic as far as like it's things that we're that are on the horizon that we're all taking a look at right now. So as what you were talking about is very SRE-esque, you know. So that's where I was just kind of
Yeah.
it triggered the question.
it's basically a concept of operate first, right? Like we run the service, we understand how it behaves, we really understand how our users behave. Like, you saw how fast Eagle could identify a failure, right? Because like, he's skilled. That's what he do. That's what he does. He goes through failures and tries them, and understand where people can fail and how. Okay, so this is like a great example of skills that we gain because we run the service, because we understand our customers and partners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess a couple of things as we kind of wrap up here. So one on the SRE topic. So Hillary, who is co-host of the GitOps Guide to the Galaxy, is one of the Red Hat SREs. So if you have SRE questions, tune into that live stream and you can ask any questions about kind of what that role is like, what that life is like, and get some information directly from somebody who's doing it. So for our stream here, so we do only have a couple of minutes left. If you have any questions, anything that comes to mind, RHope 9, I see a request there for OpenShift Service Mesh 2.2. Please be sure to ask those. So we are in the process of doing the enablement for 2.2. So I'll chat with Ortwin once we're ready. I think it'll be great to bring him back on and we can talk
awesome.
more about what's going on there. So yeah, and I know Ortwin loves to present and loves to talk with folks. So I was chatting with him a week or two ago, and he was talking about going in for a partner meeting, and like it was similar to me, you know, going to Dallas and traveling for the first time in a while. You know, you forget how to do it. He said he got caught in a traffic jam for like 6 hours in Germany. I'm like, yeah, I remember those days. I don't. Working from home has its advantages, right? I see that Ram is in the office today, though. So yeah, any questions that you have that have popped up that you haven't asked yet, please go ahead and submit those over. Again, you can always reach out to us after the stream, or if anything that you don't want to post here into chat during the live stream, you can reach out to me, andrew.sullivan@redhat.com, or @practicalandrew on Twitter and Reddit and all of the other places. Also LinkedIn. Several people have reached out to me on LinkedIn as well. So don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. And then the last thing that I'll promote here real quick is the Advanced Cluster Managers. So the ACM team have revamped and rebranded their live stream. It is now the Cloud Multiplier. And the first episode was yesterday. So Gurney and company, Gurney and Joydeep, I believe, are the two reoccurring hosts. And yesterday they talked about HyperShift. So if you've heard about HyperShift, if you're curious about HyperShift, definitely give that stream a review or a watch. They did a great job of going into and showing what it is, which in case you're curious, it's putting the OpenShift control plane, hosting it as pods in another cluster, and then using all the various mechanisms inside of OpenShift to spin up, worker nodes, compute nodes for that control plane automatically. To me, that'll be. I'm looking forward to when we can use that with a number of different places. Right, it'll make lab clusters, test clusters super fast to spin up, and much easier. So yeah, please give them a watch. They did a great job, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of what they've got going on with ACM. Let's see. Last things. I don't know, Johnny. What's our topic for next week? Do we have one yet?
I don't know.
I
don't think so.
I think we were considering ACM 2.5, which should be it should be available in the not too distant future, but I don't think we've actually identified precisely what we're going to talk about yet. So keep an eye on the various social medias, subscribe to the channel on whatever platform you're on, all of that other stuff. And so that way you'll know whenever we do figure out that topic, you'll be amongst the first to know. And we will be back here, same bat time, same bat channel next week at 11 a.m. Eastern. Trying to think if there's anything else. Again, it's like I feel like I fell off the horse, right? I'm trying to remember how we do this.
You're doing good, man. You're doing good. Keep it up.
I'm trying not to ramble. I promise. Okay. That's all I've got. So Khalid, thank you. I appreciate everybody who's joined today. Thank you for all of the questions, all the chat. We do love getting chat from you all, knowing what you're interested in, all the questions that you ask. It's what really drives us and keeps us motivated doing these. I won't say that's the only thing, right? We love the technology too, but as we go through these live streams. Bram, thank you so much for joining today. This has been super interesting. I've learned a lot. I feel like I've been using Assisted Installer like literally for the better part of 2 years, and I still learned things today. And so thank you for joining. Really appreciate it, and all the hard work that you and the team have put in. I'll if you have anything to say, please go ahead. And if not, I'll hand over to Johnny for last words.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having me. We do enjoy all the feedback that we get, and we continuously look how we can improve the product. So yeah, as Andrew said, feel free to approach us, to send us emails, tweets, other media, open Bugzilla's issues, and we'll try to address those. And start using it to really help you to install OpenShift.
Yeah, it just ditto what Andrew said. You know, I think I'm excited with the direction that you guys are going, and I think that it's awesome. You know, it's super exciting. I think that there's going to be a lot of customers that hopefully start picking it up from this perspective, and you know, they can actually find it as enjoyable to deploy OpenShift as the rest of us do now, since we have it all automated. But you know, I'm excited. I think that the future is looking good for the Assisted Installer. So thank you very much for coming on. This was fantastic. And Stephanie in the background.
I know there are already many customers. So yeah, but yeah, bring them more.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week. We'll see you next week.
Yep. See you.
Bye. Thank you.